Bob, over to you. Why tell us your story? It's chapter 3 in the book. So in the book, we've got many pages, but we want to hear your potted summary, your executive summary of the story we wrote in chapter 3.
Okay, thank you very much, Louise. It's a pleasure to be here. And it's a pleasure Jane's on the call as well. She is my principal at our school, Magatho Primary School in Salisbury, which services an informal settlement. And she's done an awesome job, I have to say. Built a team for delivery, took brave decisions to get rid of teachers that were not up to the job, and turned around the school, moved it from underperforming to top 10 for the region, which has been a fantastic experience. I guess if we're going to do a bit of an advert for Partners for Possibility, what I gained out of it, so just as context, I've worked for 40 plus years. I used to be in charge of Old Mutual and Nedbank turnaround, and spent time sorting out SAA. He's trying to get money for SAA, as well as SARS, and so quite a lot of experience in life, but it taught me several things. First of all, and Jane better confirm this, otherwise I'll have to resort to violence. First of all, listening skills, so listen for the problem. The second thing is you don't have any power, so you only have influence, which is a bit of a shame, but anyway, I try my best to influence Jane. Unique and new problems, so it actually improved your problem solving. I'd never come across witchcraft as a particular problem in management before, but we had a few issues that we had to deal with in the early days there. And I think moving from vision to action to results. So Jane and I used to sit down every 2 weeks, and I would have I would document. I can touch type, so I'd have our action list and move from an idea through to implementation and delivery. So from an HR point of view, I think it's a great program because it helped develop me. I'm now in my 60s. I can still be developed. I also think there's an opportunity also for businesses to actually build their recruitment pipeline as well. So if you've got a location, just go and infiltrate those schools and spot talent and actually bring it on through. Also, I found actually it's quite useful from a marketing and understanding your market point of view. So SARS used to have a password reset question, which was, what is your favorite holiday location? And in Salisbury and Atteridgeville, there aren't too many people who actually do go on holiday, and you suddenly realize you're asking rather white middle class sort of questions. And then I think also from a corporate social responsibility point of view and triple BEE, so I touch 1,200 people with my involvement. We actually do things based on understanding. Jane always tells the story that we've had about 8 or 9 football strips, but no one at the corporates has ever checked to see whether we've got a football pitch, which we don't have. And so I think it's led to change within the school. We've worked together, we've supported each other, and it's been the most immense amount of fun, and I've enjoyed it hugely. And I think I'll probably stop there, Louise. But you better turn yourself off mute.
I see that. So that just gives us a kind of taster. I'm gonna tease this out a bit, and then I'm gonna ask Jane as well, because we've given you a slot of 5 minutes. We want to use that time well. So Bob, you and Jane have been up to some interesting experiences. One has to do with you teaching home and economic sciences, or economic sciences to the grade, I think it was the grade 4s or the grade 6s, the grade 6s or 7s. Do you want to share that story with us? And so this is you and Jane tag teaming using the manual that was given by the Department of Education.
Yeah. So the Department of Basic Education. Department of Basic Education gave us it's a very good book, actually, a good economics book. So Jane and I would go along periodically and do a bit of teaching together, except she can teach and I can only lecture. So I appreciated the difference between lecturing and teaching quite rapidly. But in this textbook, it actually said, in chapter 4. The advantages of being an informal trader is you don't pay tax, and the disadvantages of being a formal trader is you do pay tax. And at that time I was working for SARS, so I took a scan of the page, sent it to Previn Gordon and said, next cabinet meeting you might want to take this up with the Department of Basic Education, because I think they're teaching slightly the wrong thing here.
So that's always one of my wonderful stories about what happened there in Atteridgeville. I see Jane has turned her video on. Jane, do you want to talk about just maybe 2 or 3 thoughts from your perspective of having this big pink eye from the UK who works at SARS, who has managed large organizations, then there he is, he's showing up at your school in Atteridgeville. And then Bob, get ready, because we are going to ask you to tell the famous Previn Gordon story. Jane.
Hi, I think at first I never thought it will happen, because immediately you get a name, the first thing you do is to Google a profile of a person. So I looked at Bob's profile, I saw the scenario, and I thought PFP must be joking. This partnership is not going to happen. And he showed up, and when he showed up, I saw a lot of humility, and Bob was just different from what I read. And I've grown so much in this partnership. Bob was just a soundboard to me. The other thing is that both of us, we could learn to listen, because we can talk, Bob and I. And how he's been treating everybody here at the school, it extended to the community of Atteridgeville, to parents, to community of Atteridgeville. Bob was known by everybody else in Atteridgeville, because it started by being Mr. Bob Head. Then it came to Sir Bob. The next thing, everybody, when Bob comes to the community, they say, Bob, Bob, Bob. So he is Bob. That shows you how passionate he is with education. And since then, I'm not the same, Louise. The respect that I have for my community, the respect that I have in the education system. I will tell you a story to say, every time when an MEC or the minister has to visit the school, my director will say, I don't sleep until the minister is there. But with me, they risk to invite people to come here at 7 o'clock. For example, the MEC was here early in January. He came at 7 o'clock and nobody was worried, because they knew they will find the school intact. That's Jane and Bob for you.
Thank you, Jane. And I was just wondering whether if you want to say something about your reflections on interviewing Jane and visiting the school. But Bob, we have made being able to decide or to have control over your own diary is a key requirement now for us. We say if business leaders want to join PFB, they must have control over their own diary. And then we tell the famous Previn Gordon story, because we say we want business leaders to respond in the way that you responded to that phone call, because that made a massive difference to Jane. Knowing that she is more important than Previn Gordon has changed Jane's identity on the planet. But we want to hear the story from you, and we are recording, so we never know where this story might end up, Bob, so careful now.
I think actually Previn Gordon is familiar with the story, actually, Jane, because he indicated he's not a gentleman. I have scars. So what happened was I arrived at the school. I literally got one foot out the car and the other foot was still in the car, so I was sort of rotating in my seat, and my phone went, and it was Previn Gordon's office. And the person at the other end of the line says, he wants to see you, and he wants to see you now. So I said, well, I'm out of town at the moment, but I'll probably get to you in about a couple of hours. Now, for those of you who don't know where Salisville is, it's about a half-hour drive to get to Previn Gordon's office. Anyway, so I jumped out the car and went to see Jane and said, we've only got an hour. I've just told Previn Gordon that I'm out of town having an important business meeting, and you are more important than Previn Gordon, so you can wait. And that was basically it.
So, Jane, how did it feel to know that you were more important than Previn Gordon? Unmute, unmute, unmute.
Oh, yeah, it's the first thing that I said to everyone. When Bob left, I said, guess what? he chose me over Pravin Gordon. And they actually said, the Pravin Gordon we know. I said, yes, the only one. And that has been the story that we told parents, visitors, and everybody else to say, hey, careful, the principal here is respected by the office of Pravin Gordon. I think it did help a lot to say, of course, yes, you can respect a principal, especially in these days and age.
Thank you, Jane. I'm going to tell one more story about Jane, and then we're going to hand over to Thomas Holt. So the story I have about Jane is the first time Jane and Bob came to do Flawless Consulting, I think it was something like February 2013 or something, a long time ago. Jane was really struggling to find her way from Atteridgeville to Midrand for this course. And I remember Francois being on the call with you, Jane, and spending all this time to kind of help you to find your way. And at the time, this was one of the very few times that Jane had been outside of Atteridgeville, driving somewhere else. At that time, Jane hadn't traveled anywhere. Jane had spent her life in Atteridgeville. Jane, actually, I'm going to ask you, since that day, where have you been as kind of big highlight places that you've visited? Some have been to do with Bob, some have been completely outside of Bob, but as a result of all of this exposure. Tell us about, just give us the background to your story of traveling.
I've been to more of Europe countries now than African countries. And it's all because of the partnership. I've been to France, I've been to Denmark, I've been to the heart of London by myself, Bob not being there. You know, I stayed in his flat while he was in South Africa and I was there. I've been to Germany, I've done partner, I've been to Lancaster, I've visited people, I've used tube trains. I went to the Pancras station, I've seen Charles de Gaulle, the best station that you can ever mention. And I also had other partnerships because they heard of Bob. I've met lots of people because they followed him. So what he did for me, again, I must say this one, was that every time he was supposed to have a meeting with a key person, he would invite them. I would be the host. And of course, I would meet those people. So I became an automatic globetrotter, you know, and sometimes some places, I mean, for a Jane from Atteridgeville, from other places, then you have to fly alone, go to places, and Bob had a map for me and notes to say, if you want coffee, go to Starbucks 3 kilometers from the flat. And the next thing, I had to go to see other people in France. I happened to meet my friend in France, all because of Bob. And my friend felt it's unfair for her family. She has been there for 10 years. Nobody came to visit. I was the first South African to visit her. So it's all good, and I hope I'm still gonna do it.
There's one other thing to add. Pravin Gordon actually did perform for Jane. So I took Jane to the budget speech. So Pravin Gordon was up on the stage, and Jane was one of the noted respectable people in the audience.
Thank you, Bob.